Hello, how you doing and welcome back to the channel. So Eddie Jones has named his first Australia squad since he retook charge of the Wallabies, I guess we should say. This was a couple of days ago now, but in this video I'm going to be looking at the squad and looking at a few areas that I think are of particular interest. In particular, fly half, and in particular the rumours that he wants to lure NRL stars away from rugby league and get them playing for the Wallabies. So there's a few different things to get into. Drop a comment down below. Let me know what you make of Eddie Jones's first Australia squad, and also like the video and subscribe to the channel as well. But let's get into it. So Jones named his squad a couple of days ago now, more than that in fact. So I'm sure many of you will have already seen the squad in full. So I'm not going to go through it name by name or players really in great detail. It's kind of a more general observations here because it is fascinating to think what direction Eddie Jones is going to take this Australia side, because they are a team that since reaching the World Cup final in 2015 have continued to just be pretty average, if we're being frank. Their position in the world rankings has reflected that. They haven't been able to take any big scalps, particularly during that period, and they have massively dropped off. But I still think there are potential green shoots there for Australia. I think we started to see it towards the end of Dave Rennie's reign, but it wasn't enough for him to keep his job. So what is Eddie Jones going to do with that team, particularly given the fact that we know the kind of impact he can have? So the first thing I wanted to mention actually in terms of Eddie Jones's squad is the fly half position, because if we think back to Michael Cheika and the 2019 World Cup, and he kind of chopped and changed the fly half quite a lot really. Australia didn't have that guy that was pulling the strings at 10 on a regular basis. Then Dave Rennie came in and he kind of set himself on Noah Lolesio, who was the guy at first, and then we saw Bernard Foley, we saw James O'Connor, we saw Quade Cooper kind of come back in at various different points. So therefore I think the fly half is absolutely crucial for Australia and what direction they want to take. And the interesting thing about Eddie Jones's first squad for Australia is there is no Noah Lolesio. In fact, what he's gone for is the uncapped 22-year-old Carter Gordon and Ben Donaldson, who just has a couple of caps to his name, but impressed on what they call the spring tour, our autumn over here in the Northern Hemisphere, towards the back end of last year. So those are the two guys who are going to get their opportunity in the 33-man Australia squad to start off the Eddie Jones era. What happens going forward, we shall have to wait and see. It's interesting that Donaldson, he wasn't the starter for the New South Wales Waratahs at the start of this Super Rugby season. He did start against the Brumbies last weekend, but it was Edmed, the also another young player, in fact, who was starting fly half then. But what happens with the playmaker, I think, is really interesting, particularly when you consider for this Wallabies camp, they've had a load of players who are based overseas who are joining via Zoom to still kind of be involved in the meetings, including Bernard Foley, including Quade Cooper. And given that the selection policy at the moment is he can only select a couple of players, was it 3 players I think he's allowed to select that play overseas, I can't imagine 2 of those is going to be a fly half. So maybe only one of Cooper or Foley will get selected. We shall wait and see, but for me, fly half, really important decision for Eddie Jones. In terms of the uncapped players, I mentioned Carter Gordon. You've also got Max Jorgensen. He's the 18-year-old son of the former Wallaby Peter Jorgensen. Josh Fluke, the centre for the Reds. Blake Schlupp, the Brumbies prop, Brad Wilkin, the Rebels back rower, and Ryan Lonergan, the number 9. Number 9 is interesting if we want to stay focused on the halfbacks, because Nick White is the other 9 that has been named in this squad. I think Jones has said he'll take 3 to the Rugby World Cup, although with England that was a massive area of contention for selection in 2019. And there's no Tate McDermott in this squad either for Eddie Jones. So I think, is it Nick White's going to be the guy? He's kind of established himself, hasn't he, as the regular number 9, the regular starting scrum half. Is he going to be the person that kind of stays as number 9, and they've brought in someone who's a little bit less experienced in there to have some competition? I think we'll wait and see ultimately. But yeah, I think fly half and scrum half are both really interesting. Some of the other players left out, Jake Gordon and Rory Arnold. Rory Arnold's quite a funny one. It's basically because he plays in Japan. His team have been kicked out of the top division because of, I think, a bar fight on a team social or something. So he's not playing high-level rugby, not playing enough rugby at all, really. So Eddie Jones has said that he is not there. The one other name, and I could have gone through the whole squad. I didn't want to in this video because many of you would have seen the squad in quite great detail by this point. Langley Gleeson. I wonder whether he could be the guy at number 8 that Eddie Jones names on a regular basis, because he is a coach that absolutely values power, particularly at international level. And I just wonder whether Gleeson is the guy that could be the player for Eddie Jones to have starting at number 8. We remember how important Billy Vunipola was for England in the first kind of 4 years of Eddie Jones's reign. We shall wait and see. But the NRL, this is something I wanted to mention because there's been a lot of reports in Australia media about Eddie Jones wanting to raid the NRL, raid Rugby League, and the amount of talent there is in there to bring them over to the Wallabies. That might have been blown out of proportion, but Joseph, I hope I say this right, Suiali is very heavily linked, the 19-year-old that Rugby Australia have made him a bumper offer that he could kind of be the next Israel Folau, is kind of how he's being dubbed in terms of he's very tall, incredibly good in the air, good with ball in hand, wants to play fullback. So I think that's something to keep an eye on. Is the NRL somewhere that Eddie Jones could go to get more talent into the Wallabies? I don't think it can be a complete raid, as you know, some of the headlines like to point out, because it's going to cost Rugby Australia. If they do want to get these players across, they're going to have to give them pretty lucrative contracts. But I still think it's something worth keeping an eye on. And so Wallabies fans, drop a comment down below. How many players from the NRL do you think Eddie Jones could go and get? Do you think it's realistic that that could be a real key focus of his to bolster the squad, bolster the quality of his team as we look ahead to the World Cup later this year, but then of course into the 4 years after that, because his contract runs up until the end of the next World Cup in Australia in 2027. So as always with Eddie Jones, there is some interesting selections here. There are some players who we may never see again. There are some players who will come in, come out of the squad. He's kind of said that himself, that it's an opportunity for these 33 players to put their name up for selection and keep hold of the jersey. Whether they're able to, because ask anyone over here in England of how many players got called up to Eddie Jones camp. Some of them got a few caps, some of them never got an opportunity. That kind of turnover of player and him wanting to get players in camp and really see what they're made of is something that he likes to do. So this will be the first of many squads, probably the first of many players we see get the nod from Eddie Jones. But let me know what you think in the comments down below. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, and as always, I'll see you in the next one.